Welcome to Thinking Tackle. As you can probably tell, we're not at a lake yet, but my local pub in South London, and we're doing what thousands of anglers do every year. We're planning a massive trip to France. The lake we're fishing is pretty special because it's never been commercially fished before. There's over 700 carp in there. There's been a few fish caught this summer, up to 35 pounds. There's been a massive one lost at the net, but we really don't know what we're going to be catching. I've got 4 mates in there, just as excited to get fishing as I am, so we're going to roll the map out and start talking tactics. Right, well the road lake is basically aimed at people that want to get loads of bites. Yeah, so there's loads of fish in there. I know the guys over there, there was fish in there already, because it's never been fished basically. We've had a few people on there this summer, but it hasn't really been commercially fished yet. So the fish are pretty naive. There were about 300 stocked last winter, and they've actually put some more in last week. So we've got everything in our favour basically, with loads of fish going in. There's about 700 fish in there now, they reckon. They're going to build it up to over 1,000 fish, and it's about 30 odd acres. But the way it's been designed is all the swims are close range swims, so there's no real long distance chucking on there, you know, unfortunately for you.
What are you saying? I'm one-dimensional. What are you saying?
One-trick pony.
I've fished it for like 3 nights earlier on in the year. I did a night in Turtle Corner. The fish just weren't there. I caught one, and then I moved up to the decoy swim, and I caught 3 out of there. All the fish were showing along this bank here. And basically what's happened is, when there's only been 1 or 2 guys on there, the fish they've baited up heavy, and the fish have just moved away from those 1 or 2 guys, and they've ended up walking around just with a couple of rods in a bag and trying to catch fish that are showing on the other side. This time, because there's 6 other guys going to turn up at the same time as us, pretty much the whole lake's going to be populated with anglers for the first time ever. Now that could work massively in our favour.
Or they could run for the hills.
Or well, where's there to run to? The biggest chuck on there is 90 yards. There's no way they can get away, you know. And there's 160 new stockies gone in that are between sort of 14 and 20 pound in the last couple of weeks. So they've come out of lakes that have never been fished. You know, so yeah, that's going to play into our hands. But personally, I think this Tea Party 1 and 2, this is where everyone loves this. Because it's right, but the track's right there, the car park's really near it, it's really convenient, and basically Tea Party 2, you're fishing out to this far margin. Tea Party 1, there's like a bar area out here that, to be honest, a lot of the guys that have been on there can't even reach that bar at 90 yards, you know. But I know the bailiffs have fished it and caught a lot of fish out of there, but it's sort of, it's middle for diddle. It's like, it's not that swim's water, not that swim's water. But when I fished in Turtle Corner, I only fished really close. Because I thought, if the further out I fish, the further out I'm pushing the fish, you know? And I think if we all ended up fishing the middles, we'd all be on top of each other, all 11 of us. So if we can hang back from the edges of the swims, then that would, I think that would be best. But if I was going and it wasn't a trip, right, and I could walk round, I'd fish where the fish are, yeah? Not knowing that now, that's my favourite over there. Because I've dived it, because I helped him build that swim and get all the snags out and everything, I've got a bit of a sort of call into that swim.
Big old chunk of water as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But what I've noticed when I've been fishing on the lake on the other side of the road, the shingles there, for some reason, they always show close in here. And when we finished diving this area, we dived along here right the way through. Obviously, you can't tell exactly when you're underwater, but there are bars along here, you know, so it makes the interesting fishing, the fishing interesting. And really, I want to fish next to him because we compete against each other in the UK, don't we? But over here, we can be mates, neutral ground, and I can gather all these little tricks up and then apply them to my fishing in the UK. So that would be nice, you know, if me and Steve went in next to each other. There, and then I know you want a spot, don't you?
Yeah.
So, you know,
the little green bucket will be coming out.
The little green bucket will be coming out, yeah. They're going to move. As soon as we all set up, them fish are going to move. Yeah. There's no doubt about it, because they will not have seen 11 people setting up in one go ever before. So, if we can get out as quietly and as quickly as possible, then, you know, that's going to give us all the best chance, and we just have to play it by ear. If we have to move, we have to move. Biggest proper carp that's been out, He's mid-30 so far, and I know the boys only stocked him in there up till £28. So that some of them put £7 on the first year, and it's hardly been fished. There's no bait gone in it. So there could be, from the stockings, upper 30s. But also there's been, I know you hear this on every lake, but there's been 2 big commons lost. Yeah. I know you hear it everywhere,
Even in France, they got mystery
but there have been 2 big commons, maybe the same fish lost. And a German guy came and fished it, lost a big common out of Turtle Corner. He had 50 fish that week, 8 30s, so he had a brilliant week's fishing. But he lost one really big fish there. And he actually came back again in October to fish the lake again because of this fish that he lost. Now, that's a long way to come from Germany to come and catch it, so it must have been a big one. Yeah. And my mate Alex fished in Tea Party 1, and he lost a really big common, which he says was his wife's fault because she mucked up the netting. Bless her.
She wasn't distracting him in any way.
But no, not at all. But he lost a really big common as well. Danny, one of the bailiffs, he's seen a decent common swimming along here, but not. But these guys reckon 50 to 55 pound, so a big one, you know. And because it got stocked in '94, it's never been fished, so it could have a few surprises in it. But until they're on the bank, I think, you know, it's
maybe
just,
this week though, mate.
I hope so, mate. I'd love to see a big one get
big
caught.
Fish time of year.
Yeah, it is a big fish time of year.
So, first impressions. Well, I'm a bit blown away, to be honest. That turquoise water that I was expecting to see is living up to expectations. It's clear, there's beautiful spots out there. I can see the sort of the whitish gravel glowing through. There's loads of areas that I can't wait to get a rod out and have a feel round. We've seen numbers of fish showing already. Not necessarily the biggest fish in the world, but you only need to see that one fish stick its nose out. Everyone's enthusiastic, everyone's got the pace has quickened, they're talking about tactics already, talking about spots. We've got the map out, we're having a look at that. The fish do seem to be well spread as well, which is really encouraging because it looks like there's going to be a chance for all of us to get a bite.
Right, I've just arrived at the road lake. First impressions, the water's just like the same colour as Gigantica, that blue turquoise. It's a lovely little lake. We've seen fish showing. I quite fancy a swim called the Decoy and another swim up there called Tea Party 1. We'll find out where Mr Fairbrass is going to go and I'll make my choice then.
Right, so we've had a good look around, we're all really excited, all the swims have been chosen. Big Rich Stewart's going over in Turtles Corner, the Apache, Shingles, Darryl the main man in Tea Party 2, my good self down in the wall, and right next to me, King of the Castle, Mr Fairbrass in Decoy. So let's get on with it.
It's always a race against the daylight on the first day. Everyone's rushing to get their bivvies up, getting their rods out and everything else. So I'm going to go around there now, get a little bit of bait out, and hopefully in the morning we're going to have some fish to show you. It is the first night, so we're not expecting loads of fish, but 1 or 2 might come out. So I'm going to get the bait in and we'll see you in the morning.
Well, good morning. It's a great start. The first night here on the Road Lake. This is one or two fish I had last night. He's just a little shy of 19 pounds and the other one was just over 17. I think there's going to be plenty more bites to be had as the days go on, but I'm pretty sure I heard Dan's rods during the night, so let's go and see what he's had.
Well pleased to get one on the first night of my session. It's always good to get off the mark early. You can start working the swim then, and it's much easier to turn 1 into 5 than 0 into 1. So I'm well pleased to get this one. 19.5 pounds, a small one for in here. And these fish are the babies of fish from just up the road at a place called the Tangle, and they've achieved over 70 pounds in there. So the bloodline is excellent. These fish are going to grow quickly and get massive. So I'm going to put this one back. Hopefully we'll come into contact with a few of the bigger ones in here. They're up to about 35 at the moment that have been landed, but there have been a couple of really big fish lost. So hopefully one of us will get connected with those. So we'll put this fella back and then talk to you about why I'm fishing, where I'm fishing. It's a common mistake on holiday sessions to pick a swim that your bivvy fits in, or one that looks nice, or it's next to your mate. I've done that before and it has always worked against me. So what I do now is have a good walk round at the start of the session before the draw, see where the fish are showing, see where I can get a swim where there's a decent amount of water. And it was blatantly obvious yesterday there were a lot of fish over on that corner. There's a couple of swims over there. One's called the Cage, the other one's called Dunkirk. But because those decoy ducks are out in front of those swims, we can't fish them. There's a guy that shoots on here all winter, takes them back out in the spring, and then the whole lake's open again. But having them on the surface means that the fish like to congregate underneath them. Fish love cover. And if it's just something like that, just a strip of ducks like that, there's poles underneath them and the fish will be all around them. So what I basically did was cast out the float from the front of the swim, went a little bit beyond where I wanted to fish, and then pulled the float back and let it up so it was roughly level with the edge of the ducks. Because if I fish too far, and then the fish kites right and goes round one of the poles that the ducks are attached to, I'm going to lose it. So there's no point in getting a bite if the fish is going to come off. So once the float's up on the surface, I legged it round the other side to make sure that it was level with the ducks and not too far out. And all I did, because I was racing against the light, was just sprayed a little bit of bait all around that float from the back of it coming up to it. So basically there's no bait over the top of my line, it's all beyond it. And then that gives the fish an opportunity out there to basically feed where there's no line. And then I've wound the marker float in and then put it round the poles at the back of the swim, which are a rod length apart. It was 24 rod lengths. And then the fishing rods, I've done the same thing. So I've pulled the float out of the swim, so I'm not casting anywhere near it. I can't get wrapped up round it. And then at the front of the swim, I've whacked the rods out, they hit the clip and they're dropping in exactly the same position. And I've just splayed them out, probably a rod length apart to begin with. I did want a spod, to be honest, but it suits over there to walk round and just spray the bait around. So that produced a fish for me in the middle of the night. I had another occurrence on a rod, and when I wound it in, the hook link looked a little bit twisted and I wonder if it was sitting a little bit funny. So when I put them back out there, I'm obviously going to pay more attention when the cast goes out, make sure they're definitely not tangled, and I reckon that area will definitely produce more bites for me tonight. And then this morning, fish started showing in between me and Johnny Mann, who's just a bit down the way there. Fish started showing just out here at the bottom of the marginal slope. The last time I fished this lake, I fished this swim just for one night and I caught a fish there. So that's a great place to put a few baits and then put a rod there. If fish start showing there again, I can put a rod there. So I've actually got two areas going. I've got one that's basically out on those two tall trees that are sort of golden coloured with like the Christmas trees just behind them. That's the middle of my long range area. Like I say, 24 wraps, so just under 100 yards. And the other one, I don't need to wrap it round because it's only about 20 yards, just at the bottom of the marginal slope. And I'll just keep working both areas. If I start getting more bites on the right, then I'll put more rods on the right. If more bites come out on that long range spot and that doesn't produce, then I'll swap all rods out there. So that's the decoy swim. I'm going to hand you over to John and he's going to talk to you about the wall.
Well, here we are in the wall swim. So named because there is a wall-like bar that runs out from the side. It's approximately 20 foot either side with 9 foot of water on top. And if you're aware of its presence, then obviously you can angle over it accordingly. hence why I've got my tips up, so when I'm fishing beyond it, my line is less likely to get caught on the top of it. Down to the right, I've got a nice snaggy bay. There's been plenty of fish getting in there, but it is actually unfishable at present due to the level of snags in there. In time, they will be cleared, and there's a nice little swim that can be put in place. It's going to be a winner, that's for sure. Now, what I first did when I got here, the far margin really appealed to me. So rather than stand here and be casting my plumb float all the way across, to make it easier for myself, I went all the way around to the other side. Basically, when you're pulling your marker float in, getting it to rise up the marginal shelf as opposed to pulling down, it gives a far more accurate indication of basically the level of the shelf. What I found at the very bottom of it, it was approximately 22 foot, and the shelf itself is very sheer sided, not really practical to fish a bait on. I've chosen a spot approximately 70 yards out from the swim. To keep it easy for myself and something to bear in mind, rather than clipping up a spot at the 70-yard mark, I was simply walking around, and an underarm flick would make it nice and easy to deposit the bait. The bait I'm using is just a mixed size pellets up from 16mm all the way down to 4mm, that coupled with halved, crumbed and whole boilies, just spread in a general area. Okay, so what I've chosen to do is fish a solid bag just off of the main baited area, because I think with all the commotion of the bait going in at the start of the session, it made the carp a little bit cautious, but also curious. So what I'm hoping is, as the fish move back in, the first thing you're going to come across is the solid bag rod. So that's what I've done. Let's hope we get a few bites.
Welcome to the secluded turtle corner, named after gigantic head bailiff Danny Turtle. Over my shoulder I've got 2 or 3 acres of beautiful, peaceful water, which is absolutely key to me. As soon as I knew that we were sharing this lake with 10 other guys, I thought that's the place to be. That's where they're going to run for cover. No one can get to me here. I've got plenty of options out in the open water, as well as the all-important left-hand rod, which is fished tight to the tree line. I'm fishing that rod over a mixture of pellets and chopped boilies. Now the chopped boilies are key on this rod because although I'm fishing at the bottom of the slope, I want some of that bait to just scatter up the slope and stay there. And if you're using round boilies, they're just going to roll down. So I want to really create a little bit of a wall. So if the fish are moving along that margin, then they're going to encounter my bait at some stage. I might even put another rod on it tonight, a little bit up the slope, and see what happens. But those boilies that I've chopped will stay where they're put. So all I've got to do to make sure that I'm fishing as well as I can is just walk around the corner, bucket of bait in my hand, scoop in the other, find the marker float, flick it out. It's an underarm flick, nothing too taxing. I can control exactly where the bait's going, and then making sure that I've used the distance sticks, clipped up to the marker float, ping it out there, and I'm fishing. Okay, now the open water. I've got 2 rods out there, one fished on silt and one on a little bit harder ground, probably gravel. The gravel rod's got a bottom bait, and the silt rod has got a pop-up, and I've scattered boilies all over the top of them. They're fished quite close on a mark that Dan told me about, 13 3/4 wraps out, and it's done fish in the past, but I just can't get a bite off it despite fish boshing all over it. So my mission tonight is to get those 2 rods in on the action, and then I can really start to build a hit of fish. Let's hope so.
This is the rig that I've been using on the road lake. Incorporates a monofilament hook link. This is made of fluorocarbon. The reason I like that so much is it's very stiff, so it doesn't tangle, and it also reacts really quickly in the fish's mouth. So when they pick the bait up, the hook turns and catches hold really quickly, and that's been massively successful for me when I've been making some underwater films back in the UK. Now this one incorporates a different style of hook. This is a wide gape hook in a size 4. And the reason I'm using a size 4 is I'm using quite a big hook bait. The bait matches the bait that we're feeding here. It's a brand new bait that hasn't even got a name yet. And what I've basically done is put some cork dust into that bait and rolled it into the same size as what I'm feeding, so it's got a little bit of buoyancy to it. So what's basically going to happen on the lake bed is the bait is going to just hover above the hook. So the hook's going to sit flat on the bottom, bait's going to hover above. But the great thing about this is when it goes in the fish's mouth, the hook turns really quickly, and because it's running on a D there, the bait and the hook can separate a little bit and it allows the hook to turn better. The bait itself is not on a hair, it's pulled onto a micro rig swivel which is sliding on that D, and what that means is that the hook can turn and catch hold without having to turn the bait at the same time, and it just makes everything react that little bit quicker. So moving down that fluorocarbon hook link, it's probably 8 inches long, something like that. As the session goes on, I will probably reduce that down a little bit because it's rock hard out there where I'm fishing. So I might even be able to reduce that down to 4 or 5 inches, and that means the rig's going to react a lot faster. What you find on these type of venues, people use the same rigs week after week, the fish get used to it, and then you're going to stop catching them. So most people will fish a 10-inch hook link, it'll be a soft coated braided material, it won't react that quickly in the fish's mouth, the hook perhaps won't be sharp, and the fish will suck it in and blow it out 20 times before you catch one. This one is so aggressive, it's only in their mouth once or twice at the most and you've got them. So moving down the rig, we've got a small size sinker in the middle of the hook link. I'm going to mould a bit of putty around that, and that's going to hold everything flat down on the bottom. And you can see there I've got an anti-tangle sleeve that helps to push everything away in flight. And then moving down onto the lead system, this is quite a special lead, this one, it's called a cog lead, which stands for centre of gravity. And can you see there I'm picking the lead up from the centre of the lead, so the fish is feeling the full weight instantly. What basically happens when you get a take is that swivel will pull out of the side of there, and it will just turn it into a normal lead clip system. So if the lead gets caught in anything when you're playing a fish, the lead itself will actually unclip from there, and then the fish is away from the lead. Hopefully that releases the fish and you land it, but if you don't land it, it means the rig is safe and the fish is not towing the lead around. And then on the back of that, I've just got some heavy tungsten tubing that lays nice and flat on the bottom. It's almost the same colour as the lake bed as well, but the most important thing about it is that heavy. So that's the rig that I'm using. Very important on these sort of waters to use a bottom bait because it's nice and clean out there. There's no weed at all, and the fish are used to grubbing around on the bottom. A lot of the stock fish in here have never been fed, so they're natural feeders, and the carp's natural food is on the bottom of the lake. So I've got a variety of different baits here that are all bottom baits effectively with a little bit of buoyancy in. So the hook's going to lay flat on the bottom, but the bait is going to hover just above it. So it's not a pop-up, it's no real different from any of the free offerings, but it's going to go in their mouth that bit easier. So this is that bait that I've put the cork dust in. And then the other two that I started with are my old faithful banoffees. Made them myself. They've got a little bit of cork dust in to help the buoyancy as well, so they retain their buoyancy. And then we can't fish anywhere without having some of these ridiculously bright and ridiculously smelly baits coated in the almond goo. That's been really successful on all the lakes I've fished it, especially on the underwater filmings. So I start with a different hook bait on every rod and then swap over to what's getting the bites. At the moment, it's the bait that matches what I'm feeding, but I will try other things during the session, and whatever gets the most bites, that's what I'll swap onto.
Well, really busy old night last night. This chunky common here was the first of 4 fish. All of the carp coming to a range of different tactics. In total I had 2 mirrors and 2 commons, and we'll show you what we had them on now. Okay, now what I've had most of my bites on this session is a solid bag. What I've done is tied a very short braided hook link and fished a small pop-up inside the bag. And to make things simple, all I've done is overshot the bait, so I haven't got to worry about balancing it out or anything like that. I just know that once the bag's dissolved, the bait will be anchored to the deck, ready to hook. So this is the bait that I've got inside the bag. It is a combination of crushed boilies, crushed pellets and crushed pop-ups. The reason I put the pop-up in there is so once the bag's dissolved, small bits of pop-up plink up off the bag, just increasing the attraction. Some of the smaller particles also sort of hang in a haze in the area. What I've done is I've over time laced the whole mix with a fruity attractor, sort of just dampened it a little bit, mixed it round, left it to dry, and just carried on doing that till I felt it was right, and you get a nice strong pungent smell off of it. Okay, so what I've got inside the PVA bag is a 3-ounce lead fish drop-off style. I put that in the bag first and then slowly add layers of the crumbed bait into it. So I put a scoop or two in, compact it down, another scoop, compact it down. I then drop in my hook bait, add a little bit more on top and just press it down with my finger, grab the top of the bag and twist it round the whole time, squeezing it and compacting it. You probably lose about that much of the top of the bag. Wrap it with tape and tie it off. And actually in this situation, because I'm fishing in deep water, approximately 22 foot, I've actually put a second bag over the top of it and done exactly the same with the twisting and tying off. What I've done to make this more aerodynamic is push the corners in, just lick them and stick them over like that, just so it travels far more stable in flight. The other rig that I've had success with is this one. It's just a small white pop-up fished on a coated braid hook link, just balanced out ever so delicately so it just sinks slowly to the bottom like that, and that's what I've been fishing over my spotted area. Well, this cracking common is the last of the 4 I had last night. I can't advocate enough is stick to the tactics that you're confident with back in the UK and don't put yourself out of your comfort zone and you'll catch plenty of carp like this.
Well, good morning, and it is a good morning. As you can see, I've caught my first Gigantica road lake fish in the shape of this 18-pound mirror. Caught him just off the tree line, you can see over my right shoulder, on a rig that I've been playing around with. It's a variation of the Blowback rig, so let's get this one back and have a look at it. Okay, this is the rig I'm using. It's an 18mm bottom bait that's been drilled out and plugged with cork. Now, I'm not looking to get the bait critically balanced. All I want it to do is to simply take out the weight of that hook and make it act like a freebie. Then you'll notice there's a little bit of peeled back coating just below the bait, perhaps a centimetre or so, before we hit the rig ring. Now below the rig ring, it's coated. Now this helps that ring to reset itself. If it's ejected by a fish or blown about, the ring can't end up down by the knotless knot, can't become stuck or whatever. It's always positioned exactly where I want it. That resetting is because the coated section has a little bit of stiffness to it, so it'll always spring the ring back into position. Moving down the link, you'll see that it's completely coated from the eye right the way down to the lead. Now what that does, it creates a nice little angle coming out the hook eye, flips that hook round, lets it take hold exactly where I want it. There's a couple of blobs of putty as we move down. I like that, it just pins the hook link down nice and flat. It's out of the way of feeding fish. Okay, so you'll notice at this end of the link, there's a doubled over loop, which just helps to kick the hook link away on the cast, making it relatively tangle proof. Onto the lead clip. It's a simple fixed lead clip with tail rubber and short length, say 14 inches of tungsten tubing, which hugs the lake bed really well. And one last thing, there's a barbless only rule on the road lake. So I'm using a wide Gape B, which has a beaked point, which I find helps the hook to stay in much, much better. So all in all, a really simple rig, easy to tie, perfect for this kind of venue. Well, that rig clearly works, because not long after I caught that first mirror, this beautiful scaly one about the same sort of size slipped up on the same presentation on the recast rod. So I'll slip him back and hopefully there'll be more to follow.
Well, it's the final morning. Had another couple more carp last night, including this striking character. So now I'm going to talk to you about some of the tactics I think you really need to employ when you come to a venue like this. Firstly, when I got here, I had a really good plumb around. I can't stress enough how important that is. I mean, a week is a long time when you're at one of these venues, so you really need to know what's out there in front of you. Doing this can buy you bites, you know, later on in the week, you know, when you sort of stop maybe possibly second guessing or wanting to change around or something like that. Once you've established the area, what you need to do is pick some visual markers on the horizon line with which to line up with when recasting. This can assist you in both night and day, so pick something really prominent like a high point on a tree or a low point, something that once it's dark you're able to line up with it again. Another key point is accuracy. What I tend to do is use a set of distance sticks to mark out my lines so I know exactly how far I'm casting each time. I then note these down by rod, so every time once I've caught a fish I can literally wrap it up again and cast it back out there with minimal disturbance. So combining knowing what's out there with what you're aiming at and how far you're casting, it's invaluable. I use a diary to note down everything, from the number of rod wraps that I've done to the depths out there, air temperatures, pressures, absolutely everything. And this can prove invaluable for either yourself when you're coming back to the lake or your friends if they're coming over. You know, it's just a good starting point for them as well. One thing I would say is be prepared. Make sure you've got enough stuff, line, leads, absolutely everything. I mean, for example, I've been fishing a drop-off line, inline system and PVA bags, and in a couple of nights I'd got through a number of leads and a whole pack of bags, so be prepared.
And there he is, an absolute stunner, like a new penny this one, totally perfect. And this came on a rig that I changed around yesterday after watching Johnny Mann and seeing how many he was catching on smaller hook baits and little bits of bright stuff on top of them. I thought I've got to get on that, so I made up a new stick mix, changed the rigs around, and this was the result. So we're going to put this fella back and show you all those rigs. This is the first change. If you look at this lovely carpy munger, as we call it, you've got everything in there. What I noticed was just fishing whole boilies out there, wasn't really getting the reaction I wanted. I caught one on the first night, none on the second night, and I thought I had to do something different to get the swim going. So I thought I'm going to spod. There's no boats or anything on here, so you've got to put the bait out from the bank, but most of the swims, it's so close, sort of 50, 60 yards, it's a joy to spod. I'm fishing further because there's no one fishing over there because of those decoy ducks. There's too many ropes out in the water. So in this situation, I'm fishing at about 90 yards. Normally in this swim you'd only be fishing 50, 60 yards out because the guy over there would be fishing where I am. But that's what's gone out. So it's a mixture of pellets and they're supplied by the guys over here. The bailiffs supply them for you. 2 different sizes, and the fish are actually fed on them as well, and that's a real key. If you can get on a bait that's actually been fed into the lake that you're fishing, then you'll hit the ground running straight away. In with that you can see I've got some sweet corn. That's come from the underwater filming we've done. We've noticed that putting a different kind of food source in the swim, so not boilie based and not pellet based, like vegetable based, can turn the fish on when they're not really eating the other stuff. So a couple of tins of corn went in with that pellet as well, and you can see there I've crushed up some boilies that I've been feeding out there. So there's loads of different bits for the fish to feed on. So if they're not interested in one, they might be interested in the other. And that's produced 3 takes for me out there last night. So it's definitely worked. And what I'd recommend if you're fishing here in the summer, remember it's November now, the fish are far less active, so I haven't put that much bait in. I've probably put in about a dozen spods. In the summer, I'd start with 20 or 30 spodfuls straight away. And you want to establish a spot at the start of your week's fishing and just keep feeding and feeding back on that spot. Unfortunately, we've run out of time on this lake now, but if I was fishing again tonight, I'd put more out and I would expect at least 3 bites, maybe more. That's really important when you're on a long session, is building the swim and building it and building it. There's so many fish in here. In my opinion, you don't want one rod over there, one rod over there, one rod over there. Put all your rods in one area, keep bait in one area, and that's what's going to turn 1 bite into 20 bites. And this is the second change, the rig. First of all, the hook bait. I've got a much smaller bottom bait cut down, and that's joined up with a cut down pop-up. So it's a snowman rig, but it's much smaller than a standard snowman rig. I've noticed the guys on here are catching on very small hook baits. I had 20 millers on every rod, and the second night I didn't catch anything. So that's the time to change things around. So the hook itself is a wide gape with a curved point, and that's really important when you're using barbless hooks. If you want them to stay in better, if you use one with a curved, or we call it a beaked point, you will land more fish. Still my favourite IQD rig. So that's a fluorocarbon hook link, which doesn't tangle, lays nice and flat on the bottom, is almost invisible. It's important when you go into France to stick with the things that you're confident with from the UK. It seems to be loads of people come through that tunnel and they totally change their fishing. They use loads of new rigs, loads of new baits that they've never used before. And when you're blanking on new stuff, it totally does your head in and you don't know why things are not working. So this is something that I've used a lot in the UK and a lot on the lake across the road. So monofilament hook link down to a little link loop there, and if I pull that out, can you see there I'm using a running lead clip. That's been really successful for me on the other side of the road. When there was no weed in there, you could get away with that. Now that's got weedy, unfortunately we've had to change, but here there is not a drop of weed out there. There's no nuisance fish as well to pull that small hook bait around. If there was bream in here, I'd be worried that that would get pulled out before a carp came along, but there's nothing like that in here at all. So that makes that a very effective setup, and I think it's more effective than a normal lead clip, because when the fish pick it up, they pull away. If the lead's still fixed, they can shake their head and actually get rid of the rig. With this, as they shake their head, it just pulls further and further and further through, and there's just nothing they can do to get rid of it. And to get it out that distance, I've got a 3.5 ounce distance lead. You see a rubber connector to join that to some heavy tungsten tubing, and that makes a really anti-tangle setup. And to help it further still, I'm adding a very slim PVA stick onto there, so it'll cast a long way. And in that PVA stick, you've got some ground up pellets, you've got some really spicy ground bait, some tuna, and a little bit of boilie crumb as well. And that just puts a little pile of attraction around the hook bait, and also helps everything to stay apart in flight to absolutely guarantee that it doesn't tangle. So that's the rig I'd use if I was coming back to this venue in the summer. Put plenty of bait out at the start of the session, fish little bits over the top, and I reckon you'll be getting loads of bites.
Now, one thing that I would not come to France without is my Zig kit. You do not want to come all the way out here, make all the effort, get prepared and leave this stuff at home, because there are times during the day when those fish are up off the bottom and the only way you're going to catch them is zigs. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but be prepared to zig fish and you will catch more carp. Let's have a quick look at my rig. Basically, This is my preferred setup, which is black foam tipped off with a tiny bit of red, tied by a very, very, very short hair to the back of a size 10 mixer hook. It's quite fine wired, but as long as you're not fishing the snaggiest part of the lake, take your time with the fish, play them fairly softly and you'll be fine. Little tiny bit of silicone just to open up the gape ever so slightly. This hook link is 12-pound engage. If I move along the hook link, I mean obviously just decide on the depth, vary the depth a little bit, fish 3 rods at different depths during the day. So if I come along this hook link, see the lead system. I do sometimes use a lead clip, but this is a great anti-tangle setup. It's a inline Skyliner with an anti-tangle sleeve at the front. You'll notice I've snipped the ring swivel off because what you want to do is create that kind of a stiff section. As the rig flies through the air, the anti-tangle sleeve kicks that hook link away from the lead and makes sure that you're not getting tangles. Okay, so let's look at a couple more hook bait options. Just put this one to one side. Right, another great option is cork. Particularly buoyant, obviously, which is the main thing for a zig rig. You might not think it's the most appetizing thing in the world, but really it doesn't matter. The fish aren't taking that because it's food. They're snatching at it. They think it's a hatching insect, something moving up through the water column. So as long as it's up there, it's silhouetted, it's in their face, that you've got a good chance of getting a take. So cork's another good option, pretty consistently buoyant. Now, if using inedible, unflavoured hook baits isn't your thing, then my final option is whittle down pop-up. Just shave the pop-up down, rough it up a little bit. I go for sort of a barrel type shape. Same old hook link, same hook, a little bit more flavour to it obviously, so if that kind of thing's important to you, then this is perfect. If you want to boost it a bit more, then a gooey type liquid coated all around it will pull fish in from miles. So if you're heading off to France on a lads trip anytime soon, take the zig rig kit. It's a method you cannot ignore.
Well, this is the last fish of the trip. I've learned absolutely loads, really pleased with the way things have gone, and I can't wait to come back when this fish is a 40-pounder or even bigger.
And what a way to finish our session at Road Lake. A proper chunky common. I know instantly when I hooked this one that it was a lot bigger than the other ones I've been hooking. And I think we're going to name him Little Big Tail because the top lobe of his tail is about half the size of the bottom lobe. So when he gets to 50 or 60 pound, we're definitely going to be able to recognise him. I'd like to say thanks to all the guests on the show. They've all been absolutely brilliant, showing us the way of how to fish this lake. And by the time you see this, there's going to be over 1,000 carp in here, and they're all going to be growing like stink as well. So get yourself down here for a bit of French fishing. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the bank sometime.